You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, all of you book lovers. Kristen and I bring you the very best fiction. Not only do we bring you best-selling authors, but we read these books and we vet them and we pick books that we know are going to be hot and books that you're going to love. We have such a novel with us here today with the brilliant and talented author, Abbott Kahler. Welcome, Abbott, to BOOKSTORM.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, before we get started, I want to give everyone a little bit of your bio because we all love your nonfiction narrative books. They've been highly regarded. Sometimes people don't know everything about you, and it's really been very well-deserved and I'm sure hard-earned. Abbott Kahler is the author of 4 New York Times best-selling works of narrative nonfiction. USA Today once named her a pioneer of sizzle history. Yes, could not agree more. Her books have been featured in places like Indie Next Picks, Amazon Best Books of the Year, Library Journal Best Books of the Year, Smithsonian Magazine Best History Book of the Year. Wow, what an accomplishment. She's written for The New Yorker, The New York Magazine, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Smithsonian Magazine, and others. And I'm not done yet. She's appeared on places like the History Channel, CBS Sunday Morning, AMC's Making of the Mob. That's intriguing.
That was fun.
The Discovery Channel, and a lot of other media outlets. Her books have been optioned for television and film. She's a native of Philadelphia. She spent 6 years as a journalist covering crime, advocating for abused women. Thank you. Hanging out with mafia bosses. That's why the story we heard. Baseball wives. She now lives in New York City and in a little bungalow where she claims it's haunted. That's pretty cool too. I see a book coming out of that possibly. She appreciates a good poker hand, an old bottle of wine, and never-ending hunt for new stories to tell. We're here with her debut novel, Where You End. I'm going to show you the very cool cover. Kristen and I were mesmerized, as was, and I got to give a little plug, Jamie Ford and Sarah Pekkanen. Little shout out to both of them. They both endorsed you. They're good friends of BOOKSTORM Podcast. They've been on our show. Jamie Ford says, it's gripping, breathtaking. It is a page turner. It is spellbinding, satisfying, and mesmerizing. Kristen and I could not agree more. So excited.
Thank you so much.
Well deserved.
Well, Abbott, we are here, of course, to talk about the book that Chris and I just showed, Where You End. And I like to give our listeners just a description of what's going on in the story. I promise not to give away any spoilers.
Sure, I trust you.
And at the end, if you want to add anything along those lines, that would be perfect.
Sure.
Now, hold on to your hats, people. In this story, Cat Bird wakes up from a coma and she sees her mirror image. It's her twin sister, Jude. Now, that's about all she can remember is Jude's name and her face. Cat relies on her sister for her subsequent recovery. It's to help her remember who she is, who they are, and why do they live where they do. All of these aspects of her life, putting this back together. Now, Jude has a little bit of a different perspective. Maybe it's best that Cat doesn't remember all aspects of their lives. She reminds Cat of good things, but there's some holes in her story. And Cat starts wondering, who are these mysterious people that are following her? And why is she having these outbursts of rage and anger? Kat tries to make sense of it all, and we walk that path with her. But she realizes that there is so much more at stake, possibly even their very lives. Now, that's a description that doesn't give away spoilers, but is there
No, that was
anything else you
expertly
think?
done.
It was very tough. Would you like to add anything before we get started?
Um, if your readers would be interested in the genesis of the story, or the genesis of the idea, because I did come from nonfiction, it was something where, I've always been interested in fiction. I've always written fiction, but along the way, when I would write my nonfiction books, I would come across interesting stories or characters and think this would make a really great book. But more often than not, I didn't have the primary source material to actually do the book as nonfiction. So I kept a little collection of story ideas. And in 2019, I happened to watch a documentary titled Tell Me Who I Am. And it was the true story of two identical twins, one of whom suffered a traumatic brain injury, woke up from a coma, did not recognize or know anything except his brother's face and name. And the brother decided, you know what, in this tragedy, I see an opportunity, and I'm going to try to retell the story, reinvent our history, in a way that bore little resemblance to the one they actually had. And here's actually the twins from Tell Me Who I Am, Marcus and Alan Lewis. And from that, I also drew from my own life, which was the very first time I ever did that for a book. My mom and her twin are named Kat and Jude, Catherine and Judith in real life. And here they are. They are mirror twins. My mom parts her hair on one side. My aunt parts her hair on the other side. My mom is right-handed. My aunt was left-handed. And so looking into a mirror, looking at each other was akin to looking in a mirror. And I began to wonder, what would my mom and her sister do in this circumstance? And here's another not a Diana Arbus outtake, but a picture of my mom and my aunt.
Wow.
And I began to wonder what they would have done in these circumstances. And so a lot of the twin, the relationship between Kat and Jude is based on the very close relationship my mom has with her twin. Even the twin language in the book is inspired by the language that my mom and her twin had invented when they were young. So it was really kind of interesting to take that bit of my real life and sort of blow it up a little bit and fictionalize it and see where it took me.
Excellent. You are really delving into fascinating topics here, including with memory and trauma and all the things that we're going to talk about today. So thank you for showing us those pictures. Those were wonderful.
Yeah. All you podcast listeners, get on the YouTube so you can see these photos, because it really is fun to see the people in the photos behind the story. I just have to say for our listeners, I so much enjoyed this twisted thrill ride. You took us as the author and you showed us the danger of turning what might be a positive belief into a negative. I was so taken back and sort of enamored with this notion. Jude and Kat both believed what you think is. Now, we've all heard the power of positive thinking, but Kat slowly recalled her life and she told her these types of truths, or this is what she thought. I think I am a person who takes risks. I think I am a person who is stronger than I know. How did these self-proclamations both help and hurt her? Because yes, we all want something positive, but is there a danger in placing ourselves in a box, in saying who we are?
Yeah, it's such a good, smart, complicated question. And, I think the stories shared between twins, especially identical twins, are more complicated than the stories shared in any other type of relationship, even between a spouse, between spouses, just because there's a shared connection there from the very beginning, literally. And in some cases, like with identical twins, you start life as the exact same person. And so when you have a relationship like Kat and Jude's, these stories, all of their stories are inevitably connected. And when that continuity of story is broken, like it was with Kat, there arises a really difficult friction there. And you have Jude telling all of these stories about their past, the loving parents, the exotic vacations, the sort of homey atmosphere, many of us would like to have grown up with. And Kat is desperately wanting to believe her. This is the only compass she has in this new version of her life. And so when the questions and doubts arise, she starts telling herself her own story with these proclamations. I am a person who takes risks. I'm a person who's stronger than I know. And I think they're vital for her to do that. They give her self-knowledge when she has no knowledge at all. She's lost all of her self-knowledge. They give her a little bit of knowledge, even if, at times it's her proclamations are off base, or they might be misleading, or she's not quite sure of them. But there's things that she tells herself that I think are necessary in her journey to reclaiming actually who she is. And they give her the strength to pursue the truth, which was very difficult for her to do, because who wants to question the person who is basically literally your other half?
Mhm. And, I really like the fact that she did that, because don't we all do this in the real world? We can, in any given year, it was just New Year's Eve, and we look back and we say to ourselves this year, well, I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. Well, I'm never going to have an opportunity. Or we can do what they said and said, I'm stronger than I think. I am wiser than I think. I think a little bit, we all need a little bit of this. She's discovering who she is, but maybe we all discover who we are once a year on New Year's or on our birthday. Maybe we all need to sort of self-reflect and regroup and declare ourselves something better than we were last year. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something that I have done over the years. And I just think it's human nature. You want to sort of fortify your version of yourself. And if that version is something you don't like, or if you've come to dislike certain aspects, you want to tweak that, and you want to reinforce that tweaking. So I just think it's something we all do. And just in Kat's case, it happened to be a matter of life and death.
Mm-hmm. Very intriguing.
Yeah, but I want to ask you about another theme that you were really exploring in the story. I thought it was fascinating. Jude tells Kat that even if she can't remember something about her past, the body remembers. And we see several scenes where Kat's body responds physically before she can even process what is going on around her. Does trauma imprint itself on our mind and body in ways that we haven't fully comprehended yet in terms of science? And I was wondering, if so, then perhaps we can physically heal that trauma, maybe as we understand more about the mind. What do you think about that?
It's a fascinating question. And when I was researching the story, I kept trying to find any indication from neurologists or neurosurgeons about exactly what had happened with Alex and Marcus Lewis, or with Alex. Alex is the one who had suffered the brain injury. And it was very vague, because the mysteries of the brain are so vast, and the brain is so mutable and changing in ways. It's not it's not a static organ. And I did a lot of reading on this and about ways that generational trauma can affect people, and how trauma does imprint itself on the body. And one of the books that really stayed with me, it was called, here I have it, The Body Keeps the Score, by Bessel van der Kolk. It's kind of a famous book in this genre. And there was a quote there that really helped me kind of understand as much as possible what Kat was going through and her point of view. And that quote was, once you start approaching your body with curiosity rather than fear, everything shifts. So, from what Jude had told Kat about their past, everything had been perfect and idyllic. But Kat, decided to start being curious about that, as we had, talked about in our last question, and began questioning that narrative. And so I think that, in a way, that was her way of self-preservation. She knew that she sensed that there was some kind of trauma happening, and her way out of it was just to keep asking questions.
Yeah, it's fascinating too, because in your story, I kept thinking about how the body not just keeps the score, but allows us to remember so that we can perhaps explore healing. Yeah. And otherwise, she could have gone about her life and just, maybe wondered why she was having rage, but gone forward and not thought about things that had happened in the past. But the body says, no, we're going to heal this.
Yeah. I mean, it was quite, disconcerting for her when she thought everything in her life had been perfect and according to Jude, and yet she has these violent urges that rise up. She has very, unexplained and terrifying reactions. Here's this boy she really likes. Here's this, this person she's interested in. Why is she having these really violent and scary reactions to him? And so, I think maybe if her body hadn't risen up and sort of given her the impetus to start questioning, she very possibly could have just gone along with the flow and let Jude's stories, land and be perfect and be content with what Jude had been telling her, but her body would not let her do that.
That was fascinating. It goes right along with my next question. In the real world, we have so many quotes, mottos, memes, wisdoms that help us to deal with our past. Jude retaught Kat this lesson: leave the past in the past. Those memories weren't meant to last. Purge the sadness, purge the sorrow, kill the past and see tomorrow. And then she always ended it with what you think is. They desperately needed to move forward and away from their past, like many of us do, certain situations. But is it even possible? Do you think Kat and Jude and all of us in the real world, do we have to at some time face that past and learn how to deal with it? And these words came to my mind: stuff like forgiveness, retribution, justification, give me an explanation, a rectification. Like, do we have to find a way to somewhere to put it?
Yeah. You get at the heart of one of the parts of the human psyche that I'm most fascinated by, which is compartmentalization, and the way that and our propensity for it. Everybody has this ability, some more than others, but we all have a propensity for it. We all want to or need to do it at some point in our lives. We have to divide the feelings we're having. We have to put something over here and our pain over here, or sadness over here, or fear here. And I don't think it's a cowardly way to be. I think it's out of self-preservation. It's almost like just putting something aside, a to-do list, putting something aside just to deal with it later. And I think Kat has to do this, in terms of what she's dealing with. And in a way, Jude has the burden of compartmentalization for both of them, because Kat lost all of her past. She has nothing left to compartmentalize. There are no emotions there that she's certain of that she can really say, this pertains to my experience. And so Jude is left having to do double duty for the compartmentalization. And it's such a burden for her. And I think as the story goes along, you can see how this is actually weighing on her quite heavily, that she's dealing not only with her own emotions, but trying to navigate Kat's own emotions that Kat doesn't even know she has. Here is Jude thinking that by creating these idyllic stories, by giving Kat these wonderful, lovely little lies, she's giving her sister a gift. But as Kat, when she uncovers the truth, if she uncovers the truth, is she going to feel the same way, or is she going to feel a great sense of betrayal? And so the sort of the way that their minds, and especially Jude's mind, had to work navigating and shuffling all of these things at once, was something I really had a lot of fun with during the writing of the novel.
It is. And I also wondered, maybe Jude was giving herself a gift by retelling that story. And don't we sometimes are all maybe guilty of rewriting our past in a little stronger, more important, or beautiful way than it really was?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a long history in both, literature and in nonfiction and actual true life of self-mythology, making yourself seem grander. Everything was a little bit brighter. You were a little bit wittier, and it can also go reverse. Like maybe things were a little bit, not as bad as you wanted to tell yourself they were. It's depends on the specific brain, but I think we all have a sort of a propensity for changing our narrative, even if we're not we don't realize we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, but I want to go back to, you had brought up the fact that your mom and your aunt are mirror image twins. And I want to ask you about that. First of all, in that situation, there's a characteristic that is manifested on the right side of one, like maybe a mole or a part, might be apparent on the left side of the other. Yeah. And this phenomenon really allowed you to explore this very interesting topic of who we are at our core. It was one of the absolutely gripping aspects of this story. Now, these twins had similar experiences, and when one loses the ability to remember, the question is, can her sister, the twin, prevent her from remembering things about their past that are not on the forefront of her mind? Do you think that the twin bond is too strong in this mirror image situation, such that memories will always flow both ways because of that exceptional bond. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And of course, in my mom and her twins' own life, and in Kat and Jude's life, they do have a telepathic connection, which one of the things that really is upsetting to Kat in the after, after Kat, as Jude calls her, because after the accident, she's really not the same person. Or is she? There's questions about that, which is what I'm getting to. This book is classified as a psychological thriller. But to me, it's also sort of a meditation on identity, and a love story between two sisters. How far would one of them go to save the other? And if one keeps secrets from the other, is that a betrayal or is that a gift? And I think that, they both are doing a very intricate dance around each other after Kat's accident. Jude wants her sister back. She wants her sister back as she remembered her, but she also wants her sister back, like with a slate wiped clean, with a new history that she's being told. And so Jude realized she can't have it both ways. And of course, that's when everything starts converging. Jude's desire to get her sister back, but what version of her sister is she going to get back? And I think that, if they didn't have that identical twin connection, the story would have been very differently if this was just a tale of two friends, or something like that. But because there is always that telepathic connection, Kat can always sense when something is off, and Jude can sense like, well, here's my sister, but here's what's different about her, and how can I rectify that and reconcile that in my brain, and still have that bond that we had grown up with, basically the bond that was vital to both of their survival.
Yeah. Well, your beautiful story has spawned a lot of discussion, including Chris and I beforehand were talking about how a lot of people wish they had a twin.
Yeah.
But I was wondering here if mirror image twins maybe wish they had an independent identity, because it seems very difficult in this kind of a situation.
Yeah. And it's something that, I talked with my mom and her twin about a long time ago. And, there's a question of, they usually, especially identical twins, end up following the same trajectory through life. They have similar paths. Both of my mom and my aunt went to nursing school. They were both emergency room nurses. They chain smoked the same brand of cigarette. They wanted to go to Atlantic City. They lit each other's cigarettes with like this sort of dramatic flair of Humphrey Bogart and, in the movies. Everything between them was intimate and dramatic in a way that it's just not with other relationships. And I wondered, do they consciously follow each other's path? Do they choose to do that? Or is it something that just they can't help? And I don't think that was something that either of them could even answer, because they're so intertwined, that it's, in some ways it was possible to separate one's consciousness and one's free will from the other one.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Fascinating. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there are so many. I'm going to just hold the book up one more time for our readers. You don't want to miss this book. It is intriguing on so many levels. It's a great mystery, number one. We don't want to get into give any spoilers, but there's a great story and a plot under here that, I have to be honest, I couldn't stop thinking about it, even to this day. Really, really touched something. And I think it's going to be a very big success. Let me ask you something before we let you go. Can you tell us what you might be working on next? Are you going to do another novel, or are you going to go back to nonfiction?
Well, I actually have a nonfiction project in the works. I will do another novel. I'm under contract for another novel, and I'm already thinking about what that might be, and it's kind of exciting. But my next book will be nonfiction. It is called Then Came the Devil, and it tells the true story of a group of settlers who fled Germany in the years leading up to World War II. Desiring to create a utopia, they went to the very remote Galapagos island of Floriana. And it went horribly awry, as utopias inevitably do. It turned into a sort of adult Lord of the Flies. And in the end, there's some mysterious deaths and disappearances. And I had a lot of fun researching and writing that book. That should be out in May of 2025.
We're going to pick it up. That sounds wonderful. As of right now, Bookstorm Podcast only does novels, but we're thinking of expanding, and that sounds just wonderful. Let me tell for our listeners, get the book. And in the meantime, you have to connect with Abbott Kahler. You can find her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You could sign up for her monthly or so Wicked History newsletter. Tell us a little bit what that is.
Oh, it's a collection of interesting bits from history that again wouldn't lend themselves to books, but they're great little nuggets, short reads about really intriguing people or events from history. I did a whole series on recluses, that kind of thing, unsolved murders, weird little rabbit holes. Rabbit holes are my favorite things. So yeah, it's been fun to do that too.
And I also saw mention that you have started or are starting a podcast about George Remus, the Mad Bootleg King on
Yeah,
iHeartRadio.
it is already out there. It's on iHeartRadio. It is based on my most recent nonfiction book called The Ghost of Eden Park. And it's about George Remus, who was the most successful bootlegger in American history. He was the inspiration for Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby. And there's a delicious, sordid love triangle between Remus, his wife, and a federal prohibition agent. And he is quite a fascinating character and really should be a household name. If anybody watched Boardwalk Empire, he was a minor character on there. He's the one who spoke of himself in the third person.
That sounds great. We got to tune that in. There's nothing better than a novel. This is what we love about novels. They really do have some truth to it, a little bit of a true story that you've woven into something fabulous and nonfiction. So thanks so much. It's been really a pleasure. So
Thank
good
you.
to
It's
meet
a
you,
lot of
Abbott.
fun. Yeah, you too. And I look forward to hearing what you guys do next for your next books.
Thank you, Evan. Well, Chris, as we are wont to do, we dove deep into psychology and identity, and some of the thoughts that she offered were so thought-provoking. That's how this story is. It's entertaining, it's deep, it is absolutely interesting. I think both of us went off and did our own little rabbit hole research, like we usually do as well. And I wanted to ask you about that. We're talking about these mirror image twins, and I I felt in some respects that some people might view this as a little suffocating. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I
Or
thought this mirror image twin was so fascinating. This is what I love about these books that Kristen and I read. We can't give you any spoilers, but before and after the show, we talk about everything, the plot, everything. We loved every ounce of it. It is amazing. But I have this weird thing. I thought it was everyone, but I've grown up my whole life wishing I was a twin or just wishing I had a sister. I don't even have a sister. And I love the relationship between these two people. And I love the fact that maybe they could, whether you call it mental telepathy or you just call it a sixth sense, feel or know things about each other. I think it would be a wonderful gift to have someone in your life who knows you a little more deeper. But then the flip side, like you said, maybe we also need individuality. We need to be our own person. What do you think?
yeah, because I think about the events in our life that shape us and help us understand better who we are, but you're always experiencing those through the lens of somebody else by your side. And like you said, that could be positive, but that also is a little inhibiting in some respects. Who would you be without that person? It would probably be totally different. And I think that's true in sibling relationships too, right? You might be a whole different person if not for your five brothers who harassed you, or your sisters who caused you to go in that direction. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's a good point, Kristen. Also, what about an identical twin who is very close, like Abbott's aunt and mother? When one passes away, what happens to the other one? Almost like a spouse of like 60 years. One dies and the other one falters and often passes away shortly thereafter, strangely. So that is an unusual thing. The good of having someone who understands you in the deepest way, but also maybe the flip side of you don't want everyone to see everything about you and you want to be an individual. That's a great point. We also didn't have time to ask her this, but there was a character in the book called Jackie. Her voice rose from the crowd and she declared a truth that I found maybe disturbing, but this is who Jackie was in the book. She said, "No one is born weak. Everyone has the potential within themselves to find that kernel of strength, even if it's small, and multiply it until they're powerful. So the best we can do for those is to show them that weakness, draw it out of them, and find it and hang it up for everyone to see." And I don't know, I thought about this for a while. I thought, okay, Yes, maybe it's good for someone to show us a weakness that we can work on. But what if it's a very serious weakness, like a very severe past trauma, post traumatic stress, maybe from being in a war or a prisoner of war? Maybe we don't ever heal that weakness. Maybe we just learn to exist with it. This is a tricky thing. I don't think there's a cut and dry answer because we're so different. What did you think?
Yeah, that did hit me a little bit disturbing too, because think about, how we respond to somebody highlighting something about ourselves. We all respond differently. Some people embrace criticism, some people harden themselves, some people deny that that's an issue, some people compensate for it by going overboard in another direction. So it's tricky when you think about highlighting a weakness to strengthen someone. I'm not sure it always does, but that character was very thought provoking and had very unconventional methods for dealing with trauma. So maybe there's something to be learned from that character and how she conducted her life.
Yes, that's what I love about Abbott Kahler's writing and this book. We're in the heart, in the mind, in the body of all different sorts of people. We understand their thought process. We crawl in there and see, and that is what makes a great thriller right there. Pick it up, readers. Don't miss this one. You're going to love it. Guess what we have next? A whole series lined up for you. I'm going to tell you the author's name. They're great novels. Chris and I have been reading through them and loving them. We've got Nick Petrie, Jill Shalvis, Mary Kubica, AJ Hartley, CJ Ray, Michelle Gable, Emma Gray, Derva McTiernan, Susan Mallory, Lisa Unger coming back again, Heather Gudenkoff coming back again, Liza Palmer, and Christopher Reich.
And listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for going to our YouTube and seeing these amazing authors. I think Chris told me before the show that we've got listeners in 75 countries and territories, all 50 states, 1,500 plus cities. We love it. We're so thankful. And I think it's because people want to dive down deep into these life-changing stories and themes because it is real life. That's where fiction comes from, after all. So, of course, we want you to stay on the radar with us, listeners. BOOKSTORMPodcast.com. Find us there. Facebook, Instagram, X, on TikTok. I already mentioned YouTube. We have 100 plus videos and episodes that you can tune into on all different topics, but all with your favorite writers. Until next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.